Welcome back to another episode of the Special Forces in World War II podcast, where we explore the bold, the daring, and the extraordinary stories, tactics, and equipment of the special and specialized forces whose actions helped shape the outcome of the Second World War. I am your host, Michael Wyers, and in this episode starts with the British Army is on the wrong side of the Channel. It is the first week of June 1940. 338,000 men have been lifted from the beaches of Dunkirk by every vessel the Admiralty can find: destroyers, paddle steamers, yachts, fishing trawlers from Ramsgate. They have come home without their tanks, without their guns, without their lorries, and in many cases, without their boots. The army has been saved. The strategic position has not. France is falling. By the end of the month, she will have surrendered. The Wehrmacht stands at every Channel port, from Hendaye to The Hague. There is no Allied foothold left anywhere on the continent of Europe. The men who came home from Dunkirk have come home to a country that now has to plan, in cold detail, how to send them back. The problem is concrete and physical. There are no Allied-held ports on the European coast. There will not be any until the Allies take one. To take one, the army must be put ashore somewhere else first, on an open beach against a defended coastline, in the teeth of the Atlantic Wall that will rise across the next 4 years. The Royal Navy has nothing that can do this, at scale. The standard British infantry landing craft, the landing craft, Assault, carries 35 men. It cannot cross the Channel under its own power. It has to be lowered into the sea from the davits of a mothership anchored offshore. The American Eureka boat, the future Higgins boat, carries 36 men and the same limitation. To put a division on a beach, the Royal Navy needs hundreds of these craft and ships large enough to carry them within davit range of a coast covered in concrete pillboxes and 88mm guns. What the Allies need does not exist. A vessel large enough to carry an entire infantry company across open water, small enough to ground on a gently sloping beach and put the men ashore directly from her own decks, seagoing enough to cross the Atlantic under her own power in numbers sufficient to land an army. The vessel that will solve this problem is sketched out, in outline 18 months later, in a room in Combined Operations Headquarters in London. Within 5 months of the sketch, the first hull is afloat. This is the story of the landing craft Infantry Large. So, let's start at the beginning. After the fall of France in June 1940, Britain faces a strategic reality that will dominate Allied planning for the next 4 years. Any counterattack against Hitler's fortress Europe must come from the sea. French ports lie in German hands. Any invasion force must be deposited directly onto open beaches. The existing inventory of landing craft is wholly inadequate for the task. The standard British infantry landing craft is the landing craft Assault, the LCA. It carries 35 troops. It cannot cross open water under its own power. It must be lowered into the sea from the davits of a larger mothership, the landing ship, Infantry. This two-stage process is slow. It severely limits the scale of the initial assault waves. The Americans have their own equivalent. In 1940, it is the landing craft, personnel, large, the LCP-L, better known as the Eureka boat, built by Andrew Higgins in New Orleans. It carries some 36 men. The improved landing craft, vehicle, personnel, the LCVP, follows in 1942. Both lack the range and seaworthiness for independent ocean crossings. Both must be carried to the beach by a larger ship. The landing ship, tank, the LST, is under development. It is designed for vehicles, not for infantry. At approximately 10 knots, it is too slow to serve as an infantry carrier in a time-critical assault. What the Allies need is an intermediate vessel, larger than an assault craft, smaller than a transport, seagoing, under its own power, capable of carrying an entire infantry company across open water and landing those men directly onto a beach, capable of being produced in the hundreds in shipyards already strained by destroyer and merchant programs. The requirement is recognized in talks between Churchill, the Staff of Combined Operations under Vice Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten, and Admiral Harold Stark of the United States Navy in late 1941. The vessel itself does not yet exist. The requirement originates with British Combined Operations Headquarters, at that time under Vice Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten. The Admiralty draws up specifications for a vessel tentatively designated the Giant Raiding Craft. It is a steel-hulled vessel of approximately 46 meters in length. It must deliver 200 soldiers directly onto beaches up to 370 kilometers from the United Kingdom. The concept is framed as a raiding craft rather than an invasion vessel. The choice is partly political. Characterizing the design as a raiding craft helps secure the interest of the United States Army, which favors small landing craft over large landing ships. The formal requirement is transmitted to Washington on April 30th, 1942. British steel production is already earmarked for destroyer construction. Domestic building is impossible. The project is referred to the United States. The United States Navy Bureau of Ships, known as BU Ships, receives the British plans. BU Ships reworks them substantially for American mass production and for broader operational use. The modifications reshape the original concept considerably. The British design provides only ferry-style bench seating, suited to short channel crossings. BU Ships adds sleeping accommodation and galley facilities for longer voyages. A beach extraction capability is incorporated using variable pitch propellers and a stern kedge anchor winch system. Construction is simplified by eliminating curved surfaces wherever possible. The simplification permits mass production in non-traditional shipyards. Additional fuel stowage gives the vessels transoceanic range. They can cross the Atlantic under their own power without being carried aboard larger ships. George Lawley and Son of Neponset in Dorchester, Massachusetts, serves as the primary design yard. Their drawings are shared with 9 other United States shipyards. These yards will build the landing craft, infantry, large, designated LCIL. The design is a genuinely joint effort. British Combined Operations defines the operational requirement and the initial concept. BU Ships develops it into a producible design. American industry then mass produces it. Britain separately designs and builds its own variant. The landing craft, infantry, small, designated LCIS, and known as the Fairmile Type H. It is a wooden-hulled vessel of approximately 32 meters in length. It carries 102 troops. The wooden construction avoids further strain on Britain's limited steel resources. The pace of development is extraordinary, even by wartime standards. The first contracts are signed on June 3, 1942, with George Lawley and Son, and with the New York Shipbuilding Corporation of Camden, New Jersey. The first keel is laid at Bethlehem Steel's Hingham Shipyard on June 29, 1942. Production begins across multiple yards on July 7, 1942. The first vessel is launched in September 1942. The first unit is completed on October 9, 1942. This is barely 5 months after the requirement is transmitted from London. The improved LCI 351 subclass follows in swift succession. Its first keel is laid on March 5, 1943. The vessel is launched on April 8, 1943. Commissioning follows on May 14, 1943. A group of 8 LCIL vessels conducts sea trials in late 1942. They cross from Norfolk, Virginia to Bermuda. The group weathers force 4 winds during the crossing. The trial demonstrates the type's ocean-going capability. The first LCIL vessels enter combat in late 1942 or early 1943. Their exact participation in Operation Torch in November 1942 remains debated in the sources. Some accounts record Royal Navy LCIL vessels sailing from the United Kingdom for North Africa. Others maintain the type is too new to have participated. By July 1943, LCIL vessels are unquestionably in combat in 2 simultaneous theatres, operating at Sicily in the Mediterranean and in the Solomon Islands in the Pacific. All landing craft, infantry, large vessels are constructed in the United States. 10 shipyards participate. All are mobilized under wartime emergency shipbuilding contracts. George Lawley and Son at Neponset in Dorchester, Massachusetts, serves as the primary design yard. Their drawings are shared with every other participating yard. Lawley itself later builds 47 landing craft support large Mark III vessels on the same hull. The 2 first contract yards begin work in June 1942. New York Shipbuilding Corporation at Camden, New Jersey, produces hulls LCI 1 through LCI 60. 12 of these, hulls LCI 49 through LCI 60, are later cancelled. Consolidated Steel Corporation at Orange, Texas, produces hulls LCI 61 through LCI 96, and further vessels beyond. At peak production, Consolidated Steel employs 20,000 workers. The largest single producer is Bethlehem Steel at Hingham, Massachusetts. The yard is an emergency facility built across approximately 61 hectares. It lays the first LCIL keel on June 29, 1942. Hingham produces hulls LCI 97 through LCI 160, of which the final 24 are cancelled. Federal Shipbuilding and Dry Dock at Port Newark, New Jersey, is a subsidiary of United States Steel. It produces hulls in the LCY 161 through LCY 350 range, the largest single block of production. Brown Shipbuilding Company at Houston, Texas, produces hulls from LCI 337 onwards. It also builds 61 destroyer escorts in parallel. New Jersey Shipbuilding Corporation at Barber in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, produces hulls from LCI 547 onwards. Management of that yard is later taken over by Todd Shipyards at the request of the United States Navy. 2 yards operate on the Pacific coast. Commercial Iron Works at Portland, Oregon, produces hulls including LCI 725 and from LCY 780 onwards. The yard also builds 52 landing craft, support, large, Mark III vessels. Albina Engine and Machine Works, also at Portland, produces 21 hulls in the range LCI-1013 through LCI-1033. Albina builds a further 31 landing craft, support, large, Mark III vessels. 1 yard operates on the Great Lakes. Defoe Shipbuilding Company at Bay City, Michigan, produces hulls from LCY 1077 onwards. Defoe builds 47 LCIL vessels using an innovative rollover construction method. Hulls are welded upside down on the keel, then rotated right side up for fitting out. The technique saves significant welding time and shortens delivery. The monthly output figures describe an industrial achievement of remarkable speed. Between September and December 1942, the yards complete 153 units. September delivers 1 vessel, October 25, November 59, December 68. Across 1943, the yards complete 305 units. January delivers 70. The figure then falls sharply: 47 in February, 22 in March, 10 in April, 3 in May. June produces 9. July 16, August 22, September 23, October 25, November 28, December 30. The dramatic decline in early 1943 reflects a deliberate change. The original LCI-1 subclass is being phased out. The improved LCI-351 subclass is replacing it with revised ramps and a new pilot house layout. 45 hulls still on the slipway are cancelled to clear the yards for the improved design. Between January and October 1944, the yards complete approximately 465 units. January delivers 35, February 34, March 54, April 69, May 78, June 60, July 44, August 36, September 27, October 26. Peak monthly output reaches 78 vessels in May 1944. The timing is deliberate. The output is matched to the industrial build-up preceding the Normandy landings. Total production reaches 923 LCIL vessels. One museum source cites a higher figure of 951. The discrepancy almost certainly reflects the inclusion of the 130 landing craft. Support: large. Mark III fire support craft, purpose-built on the same hull. The 923 completed LCIL vessels do not all serve under the United States flag. A significant proportion passes to Allied navies under wartime transfer agreements. 211 LCIL vessels are transferred to the Royal Navy under the Lend-Lease program. They are drawn primarily from the first subclass, covering hulls LCI-1 through LCI 349. This is the same early subclass whose phase-out drives the production decline of early 1943. In Royal Navy service, these vessels are designated HMS LCI L, followed by their pennant number. They generally retain their United States hull numbers. A further 30 LCIL vessels are transferred to the Soviet Navy under Project Hula. The transfers take place at Cold Bay in Alaska between June and July 1945. The vessels receive the Soviet designation DS, standing for Desantny Suda, meaning landing craft. They are numbered DS-1 through DS-30. The remaining hulls serve under the United States Navy. Hull numbers run from LCI L-1 through approximately LCI L-1098. Gaps in the sequence reflect the cancelled hulls already described at New York Shipbuilding, at Hingham, and during the LCY-1 to LCI 351 transition. The LCI-1 subclass encompasses hulls 1 through 349, of which 299 are completed. The LCI 351 subclass encompasses hull 350 onward. Service does not end with the war. On February 28, 1949, all remaining LCIL vessels in the United States Navy Infantry are reclassified. They become landing ship, infantry, large, designated LSIL. The redesignation acknowledges what operational service has already demonstrated. The LCIL is a seagoing ship, not a craft. Holding on the other two questions, bow door date and bullet magnets attribution. I'll default to from mid-1944 and attributed to the troops unless you override before the relevant subsection. The first subsection doesn't touch either point, so I can start now, and you can call those before I reach subsections 2 and 3. The redesignation of 1949 acknowledges what design and performance already make clear. The LCIL is built as a seagoing ship from the outset. The vessel measures 48.31 meters in overall length, with a beam of 7.09 meters. The resulting hull is long and narrow, with a beam-to-length ratio of approximately 1 to 6.9. Draft varies with loading condition. In light condition, mean draft is 0.95 meters. In landing condition, the vessel trims by the stern, with 0.81 meters forward and 1.47 meters aft. The stern-heavy trim is deliberate. It allows the shallow bow to ride up onto a beach. Fully loaded, draft increases to approximately 1.63 meters forward and 1.80 meters aft. Displacement differs between subclasses. The LCI L-1 class displaces 240 tons light and 426 tons loaded. The improved LCI L-351 class is somewhat lighter. It displaces 219 tons light and 391 to 395 tons loaded. The hull is of all-steel welded construction, using mild shipbuilding steel. Plating measures approximately 6.35 millimeters on the bottom and 4.76 millimeters on the side shell. The hull is flat-bottomed. It is deliberately designed without a conventional keel to facilitate beaching on gently sloping shores. The design landing slope is 1 in 100. This reflects the anticipated use on the flat beaches of northern France. Construction is intentionally simplified, with as few curves as possible. The boxy appearance enables non-traditional shipbuilding facilities, such as bridge builders and steel fabricators, to participate in production. The hull is subdivided by transverse, watertight bulkheads into multiple compartments. These comprise the forepeak and chain locker, the forward troop compartments to port and starboard, the engine room, the after troop and crew compartments, the fuel and water tank spaces, and the lazarette and steering gear compartment aft. Protective armor consists of 51mm plastic splinter protection on the gun tubs and the conning tower. 70mm plastic armor is fitted around the conning station, the wheelhouse, and the gun positions. 3 skegs are fitted to the hull bottom aft. They provide tunnel protection for the 2 propellers. The final sections of the propeller shafts are recessed into V-shaped channels in the hull bottom. The arrangement prevents the propellers from striking the seabed during beaching operations. The power plant is standardized across all LCIL production. It consists of 2 banks of 4 Detroit diesel 671 inline 6-cylinder 2-stroke diesel engines. The configuration is designated the Detroit Diesel 6051 Quad 71. Each bank of 4 engines is coupled together via individual drive clutches. Each bank drives 1 propeller shaft through a reduction gear assembly. The reduction gear is supplied by General Motors Electromotive Division, which also furnishes the propeller shafts, the propellers, and the control units. Each individual 671 engine displaces 1.16 liters per cylinder. The bore is 108 millimeters. The stroke is 127 millimeters. Each engine is fitted with a Roots-type supercharger for 2-stroke air scavenging. Each engine weighs approximately 991 kilograms. Total installed power from all 8 engines combined is approximately 1,193 kilowatts. A critical design feature governs reliability under combat conditions. Any individual engine that fails can be disconnected from its bank via its clutch and repaired, whilst the remaining 3 engines in that bank continue operating. The arrangement provides vital redundancy at sea and during a beaching run. The vessel has 2 shafts and 2 propellers. The propellers are of reversible variable pitch. This is a pioneering application of the technology in the United States Navy. The propeller shafts spin in one direction only. A head or a stern operation is achieved by changing the blade pitch. The arrangement is essential for beaching and retraction. It allows instant transition from forward to reverse thrust without stopping the shafts. Propeller diameter is 1.2 meters. 2 auxiliary Detroit diesel 271 engines drive 2 30-kilowatt, 120-volt direct current ships service generators. These power all electrical systems when the main engines are not in use. Approximately 9,000 Model 671 engines are used in quad configurations on LCIL vessels during the war. Maximum speed is 15.5 to 16 knots. Maximum continuous speed is 14 knots. Economical cruising speed is 12 knots. Beaching approach speed is reduced to minimum steerage way, typically between 3 and 5 knots for controlled grounding. Range is dramatically affected by loading condition. Loaded with troops, the LCIL can make 926 kilometers at 15 knots. In ferry and transit mode, with extra fuel carried in place of troops, range extends to approximately 7,400 kilometers at 12 knots. This is sufficient to cross the Atlantic Ocean under its own power. Hundreds of LCIL vessels make this crossing during the war. Fuel capacity is 110 to 130 tons of diesel fuel, equivalent to approximately 860 barrels. Lubricating oil capacity is 757 to 908 liters. Freshwater tankage is 36 tons. The troop landing system is the most distinctive feature of the LCIL design. It is also the most controversial. The arrangement evolves through 3 configurations during production. Design capacity is 188 troops, comprising 6 officers and 182 enlisted men. Early models carry approximately 180 troops. Later models increase capacity to between 200 and 210. Maximum overload capacity reportedly reaches 388, though this figure represents an extreme emergency condition. As an alternative load, the vessel can carry approximately 68 tons of cargo in lieu of troops. The original British design provides no sleeping accommodation. It offers only ferry-style benches, suited to short channel crossings. All American-built LCIL vessels are fitted with multi-tier pipe-framed canvas bunks in the forward and after troop compartments below decks. The bunks are typically 3 to 4 tiers high. The LCIL-351 subclass introduces better accommodation and larger work areas. A galley is fitted for food preparation on voyages lasting up to 48 hours. Sanitary facilities are provided, but are minimal for the number of personnel embarked. Habitability is notoriously poor. The flat-bottomed, keelless hull reacts to every wave and current. Seasickness is endemic among troops and crew alike. The crew is small for an ocean-going vessel of this size. The LCIL-1 class carries 3 officers and 21 enlisted men, totaling 24. The LCIL-351 class increases this to 4 officers and 24 to 25 enlisted men, totaling 28 to 29. Key positions include the commanding officer, typically a United States Naval Reserve lieutenant or lieutenant junior grade, the executive officer, the engineering officer, and the navigator and communications officer. The enlisted complement includes the coxswain, the quartermaster, the signal man, the radio man, motor machinist's mates, boatswain's mates, gunner's mates, the pharmacist's mate, and the ship's cook. The original armament reflects the vessel's primary defensive role. It is built to suppress aircraft and small surface threats, not to engage shore batteries. Armament comprises 4 or 5 single 20mm Oerlikon anti-aircraft cannon. Each is mounted in a round gun tub with integral splinter shields. The typical positions are 1 forward on the forecastle, 1 each to port and starboard, forward of the wheelhouse, and 1 each to port and starboard, aft of the wheelhouse. When a 5th gun is fitted, common on the LCY 351 subclass, it is typically mounted atop the forecastle. Some LCIL vessels also receive 2 12.7mm M2 Browning heavy machine guns as the war progresses. Early units carry 2 depth charges, each of 136 kilograms. The kedge stern anchor arrangement is one of the most critical operational features of the LCIL. It enables the entire beach, disembark, retract, and return cycle on which the vessel's tactical value depends. As the LCIL makes its final approach toward the beach, the stern anchor is dropped at a calculated distance offshore. The vessel is still moving forward at the moment of release. The anchor cable, measuring up to 241 meters, pays out as the vessel continues toward the beach. The hull then grounds. After troop debarkation, the anchor winch hauls the vessel stern first, back off the beach. The winch is powered by the auxiliary diesel generators. Once the hull is sufficiently afloat, the variable pitch propellers are engaged astern. The vessel withdraws under its own power. This anchor and winch system, combined with the reversible propellers, gives the LCIL a reliable beach, disembark, retract, and return cycle. The cycle is fundamental to its tactical value. It is also the design feature that most clearly distinguishes the LCIL from the smaller assault craft that must be carried to the beach by a larger ship. But the LCIL is not built to a single specification. Across 923 completed hulls, the vessel evolves through 3 principal design types, distinguished by conning tower shape and ramp configuration. The Royal Navy applies no formal mark designation to the LCIL, as it does for the landing craft tank. In British service, the vessels are designated simply HMSLCIL, followed by the pennant number. The first subclass is the LCI L-1, known informally as the square con, side ramp type. It comprises hull numbers 1 through 350. Of these, 299 are completed. The remaining hulls in progress are cancelled to accelerate the improved subclass. The cancellations are those already described in the production chapter. Hulls 49 through 60 at New York Shipbuilding Corporation, and hulls 137 through 160 at Bethlehem Steel's Hingham Yard. Light displacement of the LCI L-1 subclass is 240 tons. The vessels feature a square, rectangular, low-profile conning tower and the original twin side ramp debarkation arrangement with its bullet magnets to either side of the bow. Royal Navy allocated vessels from this subclass receive a lower bridge per British preference. United States Navy vessels carry a higher bridge. The second subclass is the LCI L-351, known informally as the round con, side ramp type. It covers hull numbers 351 through 640, 658 through 690, 708 through 761, hull 781, 822 through 865, 885 through 1023, and 1034 through 1067. The conning tower is redesigned as a taller, rounded structure, providing the bridge visibility lacking on the earlier vessels. The hull is approximately 15 centimeters longer and approximately 30 tons heavier than the original subclass. Troop capacity increases to 210. Hatches are enlarged to accept stretcher litters. A fifth 20mm gun is commonly added. The side ramps are retained. Within the LCIL-351 subclass, a third configuration appears from approximately hull 641 onward. It is sometimes referred to, informally, as the LCI-641 type, or the round con, bow ramp configuration. The hulls in this configuration are 641 through 657, 691 through 707, 762 through 78, 0782 through 821, 866 through 884, 102, 4 through 1, 033, and 1068 through 1098. This variant replaces the twin side ramps with a single centerline bow ramp behind opening bow doors. The change ends the exposure of the troops on the side ramps. It represents a significant improvement in protection during debarkation. Hull LCI 402 serves as an early experiment with the centerline bow ramp concept. Engine fit is standardized across all production. Every LCIL receives the identical 8-engine Detroit diesel 671 quad arrangement with General Motors electro-motive division reduction gears and variable pitch propellers. No variation in main propulsion is documented between early and late production. No LCIL vessels are built in British shipyards. Britain instead designs and builds the landing craft, Infantry, small, designated LCIS, and known as the Fairmile Type H. The LCIS is a prefabricated wooden hull design. It measures approximately 32 meters in length, the same scale as the British giant raiding craft requirement of 1942, from which the LCIL itself ultimately derives. It carries 102 troops at up to 12.5 knots and is crewed by 17 men. The type is disadvantaged by volatile petrol engines and limited armor. Only 39 LCIS vessels participate in the initial D-Day assault. The bow ramp configuration ends one tactical problem. It does not address another. As the LCIL is committed to the Pacific from late 1943, the type proves vulnerable not only to enemy fire, but inadequate to suppress it. Japanese coastal defenses, shore positions, and small craft demand a volume of fire that the original 4 or 5 20mm Oerlikons cannot deliver. The response is to convert the LCIL hull itself into a dedicated fire support vessel. 3 principal conversion types emerge: the gunboat, the mortar boat, and the rocket ship. Approximately 219 LCIL vessels are converted to gunboat configuration. They are designated landing craft, infantry, gunboat, or LCIG. The first 4 conversions involve hulls LCIL-21, LCIL-22, LCIL-23, and LCIL-70, drawn from Flotilla 5. The work is carried out at Noumea, in New Caledonia, between September and October 1943. The primary purpose is anti-barge warfare in the Solomon Islands. The first LCIG combat occurs at the Treasury Islands on October 15, 1943. Conversions continue through July 1945. Major conversion sites are Pearl Harbor Navy Yard, the San Diego Naval Repair Base, Long Beach Naval Shipyard, and various forward area facilities. Armament varies by conversion type. The earliest Numia conversions receive one 3-inch 50-caliber dual-purpose gun of 76 mm caliber, one 40 mm Bofors gun, 4 20 mm Oerlikon cannon, and 6 12.7 mm M2 Browning heavy machine guns of the type known to American troops as the 50 caliber. Pearl Harbor Type A conversions, completed in December 1943 and including hulls LCI 77 through LCI 82 and LCI 345 through LCI 348, received two 40 mm guns, 3 20 mm cannon, 6 12.7 mm machine guns, and 10 114 mm Mark 7 rocket launchers. Type B conversions add a third 40 mm gun and 8 further rocket launchers. Type C conversions carried out at San Diego add 2 projector Mark 22 systems. Crew complement increases sharply from the standard 24 to approximately 45 to 50 enlisted men and 4 to 5 officers. The landing ramps are removed entirely to save weight and to accommodate the additional weapons. The LCIG is no longer an infantry landing vessel. It is a gunboat built on a landing craft hull. Approximately 61 LCIL vessels are converted to carry the M2 4.2-inch mortar of 107 mm caliber, known to the troops as the 4 Deuce. These vessels are designated landing craft, infantry, mortar, or LCIM. The first conversion is completed in July 1944 at Pearl Harbor Navy Yard. It involves hulls LCI L739, LCY L740, LCI L741, and LCI L742, drawn from Flotilla 14. Each vessel receives 3 4-deuce mortars, 1 forward and 2 amidships. The mortars are mounted on specially reinforced platforms filled with a sand and sawdust mixture to absorb the recoil. The No. 2 troop compartment is converted into a magazine. It holds 1,200 mortar rounds and is fitted with a sprinkler system. A 40 mm bow gun is added where weight permits. The weight is found by removing the forward anchor and winch, which saves approximately 4,640 kilograms. The first LCIM combat deployment occurs at Peleliu and Angkor on September 15, 1944, with 4 vessels. By the Okinawa landings, 42 LCIM vessels participate. They fire 28,000 mortar rounds onto a strip approximately 8.9 kilometers wide and 274 meters deep in the first hour of the assault. The 4 Deuce's range of approximately 2,926 meters exceeds that of the LCIR's rockets. The mortar can reach reverse slopes behind hills, ground that direct-fire rockets cannot strike. Personnel from the United States Army's 88th, 91st, and 98th Chemical Mortar Battalions initially man the mortars aboard the converted vessels before United States Navy crews are trained to take over. The landing craft, infantry, rocket, or LCIR, evolves from early experimental conversions. The first 2 are hulls LCIL-31 and LCIL-34. They are converted between March and April 1943 aboard the repair ship USS Rigel at Efate in the New Hebrides. The work is supervised by United States Navy Commander Dwight Day at the direction of United States Navy Rear Admiral Daniel Barbie. The 2 experimental vessels first see combat at Cape Gloucester on New Britain on December 26, 1943. LCIR armament includes 6 127 mm rocket launchers fixed to the deck. The launchers cannot traverse. The ship itself must be maneuvered to aim. Additional armament comprises one 40mm bow gun, four 20mm cannon, and two 12.7mm machine guns. Rocket types evolved during the war. Early conversions use 114mm fin-stabilized barrage rockets with a range of approximately 1,097 meters. Later conversions receive 127mm spin-stabilized rockets with a range of approximately 4,572 meters. The improved rockets are first introduced at Iwo Jima in February 1945 by LCYR Flotilla 16. Flotilla 16 alone comprises 36 LCIR vessels. They are fitted out at Hunters Point in San Francisco in November 1944. During a rocket-firing run, the crew must shelter below decks. The blast danger from the fixed launchers, with their close arc to the ship's own superstructure, makes the upper deck untenable. The combat conversions are the most visible departures from the original troop carrier role. They are not the only ones. The LCIL hull proves adaptable enough to absorb a series of further conversions, both ad hoc and formal, that take the type still further from its origins as a channel-crossing infantry transport. 49L CIL vessels are converted to flotilla flagships. They receive additional officer quarters, expanded radio and radar equipment, and modified deckhouse arrangements to accommodate the increased communications fit. They see their combat debut at Okinawa. They are judged too cramped and too slow for the role. The hull that proves adaptable to gunboat and mortar conversions does not lend itself to a senior command function in fast-moving amphibious operations. Flotilla flagship vessels transferred to the Royal Navy are redesignated landing craft, headquarters, or LCH. Some are later redesignated landing craft, staff, by the Royal Canadian Navy. 32 LCIL vessels are converted to AMCU-7 class coastal minesweepers. A further group serve as underwater demolition team support ships, informally designated LCID. The UDT role draws on the LCIL's beach approach capability, the same characteristic that defines the original landing role. Hull LCI 346 is used as a press boat at Iwo Jima. It collects reporters' dispatches and relays them to the communications ship offshore. A further 130 vessels are not converted but newly built on the LCIL hull. These are the landing craft support large Mark III or LCSL Mark III. They are referred to in the production records of yards, including George Lawley and Son, Commercial Iron Works, and Albina Engine and Machine Works, where they account for the figures noted in the production chapter. Their armament comprises one 3-inch 50-caliber gun of 76mm caliber, two twin 40mm mounts, multiple 20mm cannon, and 10 Mark VII rocket launchers. The LCSL Mark III is purpose-built for the fire support role from the keel up. It is not a converted infantry carrier. Field modifications are largely ad hoc rather than standardized. Gunboat commanders routinely acquire extra 12.7mm machine guns, often by means that do not appear in formal supply records. When Japanese suicide boats and swimmers begin to appear in the late war Pacific, weapons are welded to rails at extreme depression angles to fire into the water alongside the hull. Some ships informally add 81mm mortars. Smoke generation equipment is fitted extensively as LCIL vessels are used for smoke laying to obscure invasion fleets. Camouflage paint schemes vary by theatre. Mottled green-brown shallow water patterns are applied for jungle littoral operations. Anti-aircraft dazzle patterns are used at Okinawa. Deck plating around mortar mounts is reinforced with additional steel. The LCIL's service does not end with the Second World War. After 1945, French LCIL vessels operating in Indochina received forward-mounted 75mm guns, 40mm Bofors guns, additional 20mm cannon, mortars, and heavy machine guns. The modifications fit the vessels for riverine operations in the Mekong and the Red River. The hull, built in 1942 for the open beaches of northern France, finishes its operational life on the inland waterways of Southeast Asia. The LCIL in Indochina marks the end of the type's operational life. Its beginning lies 20 years earlier on a different shore. To understand what the vessel achieves between 1942 and 1945, we now leave the equipment biography and turn to the operational practice. The hull, the power plant, the variable pitch propellers, the kedge anchor, and the ramps all exist to serve a single sequence: the run-in, the grounding, the debarkation, and the retraction. The sequence is choreographed. It is also, on a defended beach, extremely dangerous. The landing craft, Infantry, large 409, serves in both the Normandy landings of June 1944 and the Dragoon landings on the south coast of France in August of the same year. Her log entries, reconstructed in post-war records, are precise enough to illustrate each stage of the beaching cycle as it unfolds. Where a figure is hers, this script attributes it to the operation in which it occurs. The beaching procedure begins long before the vessel turns for the beach. LCIL vessels typically circle in a designated transport area offshore whilst awaiting orders to commit. At Normandy, LCIL 409 circles for approximately 1.5 hours before being directed in. Some vessels discharge fuel oil overboard to reduce beaching draft, lightening the hull so that it can ground further up the beach. LCIL 409 discharges approximately 4,921 litres of fuel before the Dragoon landings in August. The final approach is made bow first. Speed is reduced to minimum steerage way, the slowest pace at which the helmsman can still hold a course, typically between 3 and 5 knots. The vessel runs in as close to perpendicular to the beach as wind and current allow. As the LCIL enters shallow water on its final run, the stern kedge anchor is dropped at a calculated distance from shore. The cable pays out as the vessel continues forward. At Normandy, LCIL 409 beaches, with approximately 241 meters of cable, veered to the stern anchor. The bow then grounds. Within approximately 2 minutes of grounding, the ramps are deployed. On side ramp vessels, troops descend single file down each ramp, forming 2 files simultaneously, one to port and one to starboard. On bow ramp vessels, troops exit through the centerline ramp after the bow doors swing open. Troops at the base of the ramps step into water ranging from ankle deep to waist deep, depending on beach gradient. The entire debarkation of approximately 200 troops takes roughly 5 to 10 minutes. LCIL 409 debarks 197 men in 5 minutes at Normandy. The order is then given to raise ramps and retract. The anchor winch hauls the vessel's stern first off the beach. The variable pitch propellers are engaged astern. Once the hull is sufficiently afloat, the cycle is complete when the LCIL is clear of the surf and able to make for the transport area, where she can re-embark or sail for the staging port. If the kedge anchor cable fouls on underwater obstacles or wrecked vessels, the craft can become stranded. At Normandy, the cable of LCIL 409 snags on a sunken Higgins boat. The exposed ramp debarkation is the LCIL's gravest tactical weakness. Troops descending single file down narrow, steep ramps are completely exposed to machine gun, mortar, and artillery fire. The ramps are the bullet magnets described in the design chapter. The narrow ramps make rapid debarkation impossible. The high bow silhouettes descending soldiers against the sky. This vulnerability is the primary reason LCIL vessels are generally assigned to follow-up waves rather than to initial assault waves against defended beaches. Significant exceptions occur at Anzio, at Normandy, and across the Pacific. The vulnerability drives two parallel responses. First, the adoption of enclosed bow ramps on later production models, the Type C configuration described in the previous chapter. Second, the development of the landing craft, vehicle, personnel, with its broad drop-down bow ramp as the preferred assault wave debarkation method. The LCIL does not operate alone. The single-vessel beaching cycle described above takes place inside a much larger tactical structure. LCIL vessels sail in flotillas of approximately 24 to 36 craft, organized into groups and divisions. The flotilla is the basic operational unit of the type. The flotilla's speed is a tactical advantage in its own right. The LCIL's 14 to 15 knots is significantly faster than the approximately 10 knots of the landing ship tank. Faster formation movement allows the LCIL flotilla to close from the transport area to the beach more rapidly and to clear the beach approach for following waves with less delay. The figure also exceeds the speed of most landing craft, tank, and of the smaller assault craft that have to be carried in. In assault operations, the LCIL typically arrives after the initial landing craft, vehicle, personnel, and landing craft assault waves. The standard timing is between H plus 90 minutes and H plus 2 hours, when the immediate beach defenses have been engaged and the initial lodgment is established. At some operations, the LCIL participates earlier. The choice depends on the strength of the defending forces, the speed at which the assault waves consolidate, and the commander's assessment of the risk to the more vulnerable troop carriers. The vulnerability is real, as the bullet magnet ramps make clear. The LCIL coordinates with fire support destroyers and cruisers providing pre-landing bombardment. It also coordinates with the LCIG, the LCIR, and the LCIM described in the conversions chapter. The gunboats lead the assault wave with their 3-inch 50 caliber and 40 mm fire. The rocket ships fire suppressive ordnance during the run-in. The mortar boats engage reverse slopes behind the beach defenses. Behind them, the LCIL closes for its own beaching run. Carrying the troops, the gunboats, and rocket ships have just suppressed the defenses for. Mediterranean landings are predominantly night assaults. H-hour for Operation Husky at Sicily is approximately 2:45 on July 10, 1943. H-hour for Operation Shingle at Anzio is approximately 2 o'clock on January 22, 1944. Night operations cause significant navigational problems and confusion among landing craft. Ships lose their assigned beach. Flotillas mix. Formation discipline deteriorates in conditions where neither the helmsman nor the flotilla commander can see the vessels around him. The problems will appear in the operational record of both operations. Smoke laying is a key LCIL role outside of direct beaching duty. Dedicated smoke screening runs obscure invasion fleets from enemy artillery and from aerial observation. The work is documented extensively at Leyte in October 1944 and at Okinawa in 1945, where the kamikaze threat makes smoke cover essential to the survival of the transport anchorage. Smoke is also laid at the beach itself to obscure the run-in for follow-up waves after the initial assault is committed. The LCIL's tactical doctrine, smoke-laying role, and flotilla organization are tested in the European theater across 7 major operations. The first is Operation Torch. Whether LCIL vessels participate at Operation Torch in November 1942 is debated across the sources. Production data confirms that approximately 26 vessels are completed by the landing date of November 8, 1942. Some accounts record Royal Navy LCIL vessels sailing from the United Kingdom for North Africa. However, multiple authoritative sources state the type is too new to participate meaningfully. If any LCIL vessels are present, their role is marginal. Sicily, in July 1943, marks the LCIL's unambiguous combat debut. The operation is Operation Husky. Both United States Navy and Royal Navy LCIL vessels participate in large numbers. LCIL Flotilla 1 is among the first deployed. Flotilla 4, under United States Coast Guard Commander Miles H. Imlay, comprises 24 Coast Guard manned LCIL vessels and operates as part of the JOS attack force at Licata on the western flank of the American sector. British Eastern Naval Task Force LCIL vessels land. British Army 8th Army troops on the southeastern coast. H-hour is approximately 2:45 on July 10, 1943. The night assault conditions foreshadowed in the previous chapter become tangible at Sicily. Severe weather creates extreme conditions, with winds of 45 to 68 kilometers per hour, causing widespread seasickness and difficult beaching. Most larger landing craft ground on false beaches between 27 and 69 meters from the shoreline. Among the Royal Navy vessels present is HMLCI L-124, commanded by Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve Lieutenant Alec Guinness, the future actor. Guinness delivers troops near Cape Passero Lighthouse. He lands 25 minutes ahead of his flotilla after missing a delay order. Later in the campaign, LCIL vessels are used for leapfrog operations in northern Sicily, carrying troops ahead toward Messina. LCIL vessels are also involved in the friendly fire incident of July 11, 1943, when crews fire on 23 United States Army Air Force's C-47 transport aircraft, mistakenly identifying them as German bombers. Salerno follows in September 1943. Operation Avalanche commits LCIL Flotilla 4 and other flotillas. Approximately 96 LCIL vessels participate, 48 American and 48 British. The roughly equal allocation reflects the shared Anglo-American character of Mediterranean amphibious operations. Conditions are savage. United States Navy Lieutenant William E. Becker of Hull LCY L-219 describes Salerno as the worst conditions his crew has ever encountered. They face up to 50 alerts and 8 actual air raids per day. The German introduction of the HS-293 glide bomb and the Fritz X guided bomb represents a terrifying new aerial threat. A major storm drives craft ashore, piling a coaster, 2 landing ship, tank vessels, 23 landing craft, tank vessels, and over 50 smaller craft onto the beach. The landing nearly fails. German counterattacks come dangerously close to splitting the beachhead before naval gunfire support stabilizes the situation. Anzio in January 1944 is the next major commitment. Operation Shingles D-Day is January 22, 1944, with H-hour at 2 o'clock, another night assault. At Anzio, some LCIL vessels serve as guide vessels for smaller craft, leading landing craft, vehicle, personnel, and landing craft mechanized onto the beach. The confined beachhead and small harbour make shipping extraordinarily vulnerable. The fleet faces up to 10 actual air raids and 40 red alerts per day. Specific losses follow. Hull USS LCI-L-20 is hit by a 227-kilogram bomb dropped by a German Focke-Wulf 190 on D-Day, whilst troops are still disembarking. The bomb ruptures fuel oil tanks. Approximately 3,028 litres of burning fuel cover the engine room. Hull USS LCI-L-32 strikes a mine on January 26, 1944, whilst assisting USS LST-422 and sinks. Hull HMLCI-273 is sunk by German air attack on March 28, 1944, her hull broken in half. Lieutenant Becker, by now experienced in the type's combat use, observes that the ships lost at Anzio represent a greater ratio to participating vessels than at any other operation. Normandy follows in June 1944. Operation Overlord commits approximately 247 to 250 LCIL vessels to Operation Neptune, the naval component of the wider operation. Of these, approximately 118 are United States Navy and United States Coast Guard vessels, and approximately 130 are Royal Navy vessels, including those manned by the Royal Canadian Navy. At Omaha Beach, United States Coast Guard LCI Flotilla 10, under Coast Guard Commander Miles Imlay, deploys 24 LCIL vessels. 12 are Coast Guard manned, hulls LCIL 83 through LCIL 94. 12 are United States Navy manned, hulls LCIL 487 through LCIL 498. Additional United States Navy LCIL vessels, including hulls LCIL 415, LCIL 416, LCIL 219, and LCIL 232, operate in other assault groups. LCIL vessels generally arrive in follow-up waves beginning approximately H+90 to H+120 minutes between 8 o'clock and 8:30 after the initial landing craft, vehicle, personnel assault waves at H hour at 6:30. At Utah Beach, 12 Coast Guard manned LCIL vessels from Flotilla 10, hulls LCI-L 95, LCI-L 96, LCI-L 319 through LCI-L 326, LCI-L 349, and LCIL 350, plus additional United States Navy and Royal Navy vessels support Force U. At Gold Beach, Royal Navy LCIL flotillas land troops of the British Army 50th Northumbrian Infantry Division. At Sword Beach, Royal Navy LCIL flotillas support the British Army 3rd Infantry Division. At Juno Beach, the Royal Canadian Navy deploys approximately 30 LCIL vessels organized in 3 flotillas. They are the 260th, designated the 1st Canadian Flotilla, the 262nd, designated the 2nd Canadian Flotilla, and the 264th, designated the 3rd Canadian Flotilla. The 262nd Flotilla's 12 LCIL vessels charge through beach obstacles at approximately 30 km per hour, beaching between 11:30 and 11:32 on Nan White Beach at Bernières-sur-Mer. 5 craft sustained damage on the approach, 4 on the beach and 2 coming off. Only hull LCY 306 escapes undamaged. Despite this, all troops are landed safely, including men of the Canadian Army 9th Canadian Infantry Brigade, who disembark with bicycles. D-Day losses are concentrated at Omaha Beach. Hull USS LCI L-85, a United States Coast Guard vessel commanded by Coast Guard Lieutenant Junior Grade Coit Hendley, is hit by 88mm artillery fire and mines on the Easy Red sector. 15 soldiers are killed. Approximately 30 are wounded. 4 Coast Guard crew members are wounded. The vessel capsizes and sinks after retracting to transfer casualties to USS Samuel Chase. Hull USS LCI L-91, a Coast Guard vessel commanded by Coast Guard Lieutenant Junior Grade R.N. Vinn, is lost to enemy action. Hull USS LCI L-92, a Coast Guard vessel, strikes a mine. 25 men are killed, including 4 from the same school in Kansas. United States Navy photographer's mate, 3rd Class Seth Shepard, writes a first-hand account 19 days later. Hull USS LCI L-93, a Coast Guard vessel, becomes stranded between the shore and a sandbar and is destroyed by German 88mm artillery. Coast Guard steward's mate, 2nd Class John Roberts, an African-American crewman, loses his leg to an enemy shell. The vessel becomes the subject of United States Navy combat artist Dwight C. Shepler's painting, The Tough Beach. Hull USS CIL 497, a United States Navy vessel, is destroyed by German Teller mines, though all crewmen survive. Total LCIL losses during the entire Normandy campaign, from D-Day through September 1944, amount to 16 vessels, 9 American and 7 British. Hull USS LCI L-219, the same vessel whose commanding officer Lieutenant Becker had described Salerno's conditions, is destroyed by aerial bomb on June 11, 1944. United States Navy Lieutenant Commander Corsi, her commanding officer at the time of her loss, receives the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism, despite severe shrapnel wounds. Flotilla 10 receives the Navy Unit Commendation for its actions at Omaha Beach. The combat conversions described in the conversions chapter are not significantly employed at Normandy. The LCIG, the LCIR, and the LCIM are, by this date, concentrated in the Pacific. Close-in fire support in the European theater is instead provided by landing craft, tank, rocket vessels, landing craft, gun, large vessels, and landing craft, flak variants. After D-Day, surviving LCIL vessels perform continuous shuttle operations across the English Channel, ferrying reinforcement waves to the consolidated beachhead and bringing wounded home. The Great Storm of June 19th to 20th, 1944, causes widespread damage to landing craft of all types, adding to the campaign's attritional cost. By early autumn 1944, most surviving United States Navy LCIL vessels are sent home. Flotilla 10 receives replacement vessels and retrains as Flotilla 35 for service in the Pacific. The reorganization foreshadows the type's shift in operational center of gravity. Operation Dragoon, the landings on the south coast of France, follows on August 15, 1944. LCIL vessels participate extensively, staging from Ajaccio in Corsica. Multiple LCIL vessels that have served throughout the Mediterranean campaign are present, sailing in convoy formation. Some LCIL vessels fire rockets to detonate landmines ahead of the troop waves. The case study vessel, LCI L-409, introduced previously, beaches on Green Beach at 13:38 on August 15, 1944. After an initial approach, grounds her on a sandbar too far offshore. The Dragoon landings meet far less resistance than Normandy. Total Allied D-Day losses at Dragoon are just 95 killed and 185 wounded. The figure stands against approximately 4,500 at Normandy. Minimal LCIL losses reflect the weakened German defensive capability in southern France. Operation Infatuate, on November 1, 1944, brings the European theatre to its violent close for the LCIL Hull, HMLCIL 269, and other craft participate in the assault on Walcheren Island, opening the seaward approaches to the port of Antwerp. Crews consider the intensity of the operation comparable to that of the Normandy landings. Of the 27 craft comprising Support Squadron Eastern Flank, only 7 survive the engagement. Flotilla 10's retraining as Flotilla 35 for Pacific service is one transition among many. By late 1944, the operational center of gravity for the LCIL has moved decisively. The European theater is winding down for the type. The Pacific is where the LCIL, and especially its combat conversions, will spend the final and most violent year of its war. The first Pacific use of LCIL vessels comes during the New Georgia landings in June 1943. LCIL Flotilla 5, trained at Noumea, delivers 2nd and 4th Echelon troops. Hull LCIL 70 lands troops on Rendover Island on June 30, 1943, within artillery range of Munda Airstrip. In September 1943, 4 LCIL vessels, Hull's LCIL-21, LCIL-22, LCIL-23, and LCIL-70, are sent to Noumea for conversion to the first LCIG configuration described in the Conversions chapter. At Bougainville, in November 1943, the converted Hull LCIG-70 becomes part of the force known informally as the Bougainville Navy. The unit performs night anti-barge patrols against Japanese resupply craft. LCIG vessels also operate in the hazardous St. George Channel between New Ireland and New Britain. Hull LCIG-70 later earns a Presidential Unit Citation. She is a recurring figure in the Pacific story. Under United States Navy Rear Admiral Daniel E. Barbee's 7th Amphibious Force, LCIL vessels participate in 14 major landings between September 1943 and September 1944. They deliver approximately 300,000 men and 350,000 tons of supplies. At Lae, on September 4, 1943, LCIL vessels land the Australian Army 9th Division. Hull USS LCIL 339, a Coast Guard manned vessel, is sunk by Japanese aircraft during this operation, the only LCIL vessel lost in the Pacific during the New Guinea campaign. The commanding officer of the Australian Army, 223rd Battalion, is killed when a bomb strikes the bridge. LCIL vessels subsequently participate at Finschhafen, Sidor, Hollandia, Arawe, Cape Gloucester, the Admiralty Islands, Aitape, Biak, and Morotai. It is under Barbee's command that United States Navy Commander Dwight Day develops the LCIR concept, reasoning that machine guns are insufficient against beach defenses and that naval gunfire risks hitting friendly aircraft overhead. The first 2 experimental LCIR conversions, Hull's LCIL-31 and LCIL-34, see combat at Cape Gloucester on December 26, 1943, as described in the Conversions chapter. LCIL vessels are not deployed as close fire support at Tarawa in November 1943. The decision proves costly. The devastating United States Marine Corps casualties sustained whilst wading ashore without suppressive cover lead United States Navy Rear Admiral Richmond K. Turner to specifically advocate for LCIG vessels in all future island assaults. The lesson reshapes Pacific Amphibious Doctrine for the rest of the war. At Kwajalein, between January and February 1944, 12 LCIG fire support ships, designated LCIFS, participate. They include LCIG Flotilla 3, Hull LCIG 449, earns a Navy Unit Commendation. Hull LCIG 450 runs aground on a reef at Enubir Island. Her crew rescues approximately 50 soldiers from capsized landing vehicle tracked vessels. At Eniwetok in February 1944, a tragic friendly fire incident occurs at Parry Island on February 22, 1944. 5-inch shells from American destroyers strike hulls LCI G365, LCI G440, and LCI G442 through smoke and dust. Hull LCI G440 alone suffers 7 killed and 40 wounded. Hull LCI G442 suffers 6 killed and 5 wounded. At Saipan on June 15, 1944, 24 LCIG vessels provide close fire support with 40mm cannon and rockets. Coral reefs prevent gunboats from reaching effective rocket range in some beach sectors. The limitation of the 114mm rocket, with its range of approximately 1,097 meters, drives the later adoption of the 127mm spin-stabilized rocket with a range of approximately 4,572 meters. Hull LCIG 468 is sunk on June 17, 1944, by an aerial torpedo that blows off her bow. At Guam, on July 21, 1944, hundreds of 114mm rockets from LCIG vessels strike the beaches ahead of the assault wave. The commander of Underwater Demolition Team 4 reports the Guam Underwater Demolition Team operation as near perfect, crediting LCIG fire support. At Tinian, on July 24, 1944, 12 LCIG vessels lead the assault. LCIL vessels participate in the Leyte landings in October 1944. Hull LCIL 1065 is sunk off Leyte on October 24, 1944. At Lingayen Gulf, in January 1945, the massive invasion force faces kamikaze attacks. Hull LCIG 70, the Bougainville Navy veteran from the Solomons Campaign, is hit by a kamikaze en route to Lingayen Gulf. She suffers 6 killed and 9 wounded. Her main 3-inch 50 caliber gun is wrecked. She continues to participate in the landings. Hull LCIG 365, a survivor of the Eniwetok friendly fire incident, is sunk by a Japanese Shinyo suicide boat in Lingayen Gulf on January 10, 1945. Hull LCIM 974 is also sunk by a Shinyo the same day. LCIL vessels perform smoke screening duties and stand armed guard at night against suicide boats throughout the Philippines campaign. Hull LCIL 713 of Flotilla 24 participates at Zamboanga, Mindanao in March 1945 and at Brunei Bay, Borneo in June 1945. Iwo Jima follows in February 1945. The engagement of February 17, 1945, is one of the most celebrated small craft actions in naval history. LCIG Group 8 of Flotilla 3 is tasked with providing close fire support for underwater demolition teams 12, 13, 14, and 15. The teams are conducting beach reconnaissance 2 days before the main assault. The group is commanded by United States Navy Lieutenant Commander Willard Nash aboard Hull LCIG 457. It comprises hulls LCIG 346, LCIG 348, LCIG 438, LCIG 441, LCIG 449, LCIG 450, LCIG 457, LCIG 466, LCIG 469, LCIG 471, LCIG 473, and LCIG 474. The flotilla commander is carried aboard LCFF 627. At approximately 10:25, 7 gunboats advance in line abreast through the destroyer screen. They close to between 914 and 1,372 meters offshore. The Japanese, mistaking the operation for the actual invasion, unleash all available firepower. The fire includes 152mm guns from Mount Suribachi, weapons concealed and reserved for the main landing. Every gunboat is hit repeatedly over a 75-minute engagement. Despite catastrophic damage, hulls LCI-G 449, LCI-G 438, LCI-G 441, and LCI-G 471 return to battle. Hull LCI-G 449 does so with 60% casualties. Hull LCI-G 474 is abandoned and scuttled by gunfire from USS Caps, hull number D550. Total casualties among the gunboats reach 201. The figure represents 30% of all personnel committed, 47 killed and approximately 154 wounded. Hull LCIG 449 alone suffers 21 killed and 20 wounded. United States Navy Lieutenant Junior Grade Rufus G. Herring, commanding hull LCIG 449, receives the Medal of Honor. Despite severe wounds, he takes the helm when his ship goes out of control. He keeps her in action until the mission is accomplished. 10 other officers commanding Group 8 vessels receive the Navy Cross. The entire Group 8 receives the Presidential Unit Citation. The action carries significant strategic consequence. By provoking the Japanese into revealing their concealed heavy guns, the gunboats provide intelligence that saves Marine lives during the D-Day assault on February 19, 1945. The guns of Mount Suribachi, the very weapons that have torn the gunboats apart, are now plotted on the target maps of the American Naval Bombardment Force. At Iwo Jima, LCIR Flotilla 16 introduces the new 127mm spin-stabilized rocket. Its range of approximately 4,572 meters solves the reef distance problem that has plagued earlier operations, including the Saipan landings, where coral reefs prevented gunboats from reaching effective rocket range. Okinawa follows between April and June 1945. Multiple LCIG, LCIR, LCIM, and landing craft support large vessels participate in the vast campaign. The 49 LCI flotilla flagship vessels described in the conversions chapter see their combat debut here. They are judged too cramped and too slow for the role, the limitation that the conversions chapter described in design terms now confirmed in action. Hull LCIG 82 is sunk on April 4, 1945, by a Japanese Shinyo suicide boat off Nakagusuku 1 during night picket duty. 8 crewmen are killed. The 42 LCIM vessels at Okinawa represent the type's largest single deployment. They fired 28,000 mortar rounds in the first hour of the assault alone. The figure realizes the doctrine sketched in the conversions chapter when the first 4 mortar boats were trialed at Peleliu in September 1944. Approximately 1,900 kamikaze sorties strike the fleet during the Okinawa campaign. LCY-type vessels on smoke-laying, picket, fire support, and patrol duties are among the hundreds of ships exposed to this threat. The smoke-laying doctrine, first developed in the Mediterranean theater and refined at Leyte, reaches its most desperate application here. Beyond Okinawa, the LCIL is allocated to operations that never occur. Operation Olympic, the planned assault on Kyushu in November 1945, and Operation Coronet, the planned assault on Honshu in spring 1946, are the two components of Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan. LCIL vessels are explicitly allocated for both. The 7th Amphibious Force Amphibious Training Command transfers to Subic Bay on Luzon in March 1945, specifically to prepare for the invasion. The scale of the planned operation is staggering. Given that Normandy commits 248 LCIL vessels and Downfall is planned at a scale exceeding Normandy, hundreds of LCI-type vessels would have been committed. The 30 LCIL vessels transferred to the Soviet Navy under Project Hula, described in the Lend-Lease chapter, form part of the preparations for Soviet entry into the Pacific War. The invasion never occurs. The Japanese surrender of August 1945 ends the LCYL's combat service. The vessel, built in 1942 for the open beaches of northern France and adapted across 4 years of war into a gunboat, a mortar boat, a rocket ship, a flotilla flagship, and a minesweeper, finishes the war waiting in Philippine and Soviet harbors for an invasion that will not come. And that concludes today's episode. In the course of the episode, we have followed the LCIL from the strategic imperative that produced her in the desperate summer of 1940 through the Anglo-American design collaboration of 1941 and 1942, the mass production across 10 American shipyards, and the Lend-Lease transfers that placed her under the white ensign and the Soviet naval flag. We have examined her design in detail: the hull, the 8-engine Detroit diesel quad power plant, the variable pitch propellers, the kedge anchor, and the bullet magnets of her side ramps. We have followed the 3 principal design types: the British landing craft, infantry, small, and the conversions into gunboat, mortar boat, rocket ship, flotilla flagship, and minesweeper. We have studied her beaching cycle and her flotilla doctrine, and we have followed her into combat across 2 theaters of war, from Operation Husky at Sicily through Salerno, Anzio, Normandy, Dragoon, and Walcheren, and from the Solomons through New Guinea, the Marianas, the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, to the harbors where she waits in August 1945 for an invasion that will not come. The principal sources for this episode are Gordon L. Rotman's Landing Craft Infantry and Fire Support, published by Osprey in the New Vanguard series in 2009. The 2-volume USSLCI, Landing Craft Infantry, compiled by Bill Mercer and Keith R. Steele, and published by Turner Publishing Company of Paducah, Kentucky, in 1993 and 1995, and Brian Lavery's Assault Landing Craft, Design, Construction, and Operators, published by Seaforth in 2014. The episode also draws on the operational records held in the United States Naval History and Heritage Command's H-Gram series, in particular H-Gram 086, on the action of Landing Craft, Infantry, Gunboat Group 8 at Iwo Jima on February 17, 1945. The hull-by-hull service records of every landing craft infantry large-built are publicly available on the NavSource Naval History Online Archive. For maps, photographs, original documents, and the full source base behind this episode, visit www.worldwar2-sof.com. You have been listening to the Special Forces in World War II podcast. I'm your host, Michael Wires, signing off.